Imagine a global in which Amazon or Google did now not simply dominate the internet, but really owned a rustic. Imagine if a tech organization had its own military, its personal army, its very own foreign money, and the criminal right to wage war. Imagine if the CEO of that business enterprise could gather taxes from millions of human beings and put all people who refused in a private prison. This sounds like the plot of a dystopian science fiction movie, but it is in reality a unique description of history. We're regularly taught that the British Empire conquered India. We believe crimson coats marching beneath the Union Jack and planting the flag for King in USA, but that may be a lie. The British authorities did not triumph over India. A private company did. This is the story of the Honorable East India Company. It turned into the first multinational agency in records, and to these days, it stays the maximum terrifying example of what occurs whilst earnings is the most effective regulation. It changed into an employer that was born in a small workplace in London with a handful of personnel and grew till it ruled over 200 million human beings. It did no longer invade international locations for ideology or faith or glory. It invaded them for shareholder value. It dismantled one of the richest civilizations on the planet, not with a sword, but with a ledger. This is the story of the most ruthless startup within the history of capitalism. To understand how a single employer ought to swallow a subcontinent, we have to move again to the very beginning. The year 1600. London is a grimy, chaotic metropolis convalescing from the plague. Queen Elizabeth I is on the throne, but the royal treasury is strolling low. A group of 218 merchants acquire and are constructing within the city of London. They are seeking out a way to interrupt the monopoly of the Dutch spice change. At this time, spices like nutmeg and cloves and pepper are well worth extra than their weight in gold. The Dutch control the alternate routes, and they are charging extortionate costs. The English traders want a bit of the action. They approach the Queen with an innovative concept. They advise a brand new sort of business employer. In the beyond, groups have been generally owned by one family. If the business failed, the circle of relatives misplaced everything. But those merchants advise a joint inventory organization. This method that masses of human beings can make investments money and get hold of shares inside the employer. If the deliver sinks, they most effectively lose their investment, no longer their whole fortune. This idea of confined legal responsibility lets in them to raise big amounts of capital. The Queen agrees. On New Year's Eve 1600, she offers them a royal constitution. The governor and business enterprise of merchants of London, trading into the East Indies, is born. They have a monopoly on all English trade east of the Cape of Good Hope. They have the property to buy land, and most importantly, they have the right to arm their ships. The early years of the company aren't full of conquest. They are full of failure. The organization attempts to go to the Spice Islands in modern Indonesia, but the Dutch are too strong. In 1623, the Dutch massacre. Organization of English investors at Mbuna. The East India Company is humiliated. They are kicked out of the spice alternate. Desperate for a new market, they flip their eyes to India. When the primary organization's ships arrive on the coast of India, they are now not greeted as conquerors. They are barely observed. India, within the 17th century, is the house of the Mughal Empire. It is a superpower. The Mughal Emperor, regulations over 1/4 of the arena's manufacturing ability. The cities of Delhi and Agra are large and richer than London and Paris blended. The Mughal Emperor sits on the peacock throne, which is encrusted with such a lot of diamonds and rubies that it's miles worth more than the whole countrywide budget of England. The English investors are ruck. They are like beggars knocking on the door of a palace. They should beg the emperor for permission to construct small warehouses, which they call factories. The Emperor Jahangir looks at these extraordinary pale guys in their uncomfortable wool garments, and he is amused. He presents them a few buying and selling posts at the coast. For the following 100 years, the employer behaves like a standard business. They buy cotton and silk and indigo. They pay in silver. They are polite. They are subservient. They recognize that if they anger the Mughal emperor, his armies will overwhelm them like ants. But organizations are like dwelling organisms. They want to develop. And in the early 18th century, the surroundings in India changes dramatically. The top-notch Mughal emperor Aurangzeb dies, and his successors are susceptible. The empire begins to fracture. Regional governors known as nabs begin to claim independence. Warlords upward thrust up. The vital authority in Delhi collapses. India descends into chaos. In London, the directors of the East India Company see an opportunity. They understand that in a lawless global, they cannot just be merchants. They want to be squatties. They start to improve their warehouses. They lease neighborhood mercenaries. They start to interfere within the politics of the nearby princes. They understand that it is less expensive to install a puppet ruler who will give them tax breaks than it's far to pay the total fee for goods. The service provider is becoming a kingmaker. A turning factor is available in 1757. The region is a mango grove in Bengal referred to as Piala. The business enterprise has a brand new enemy, the Nab of Bengal Sirajudara. The Nab is a young, hot-headed ruler who is tired of the organization's conceitedness. He is bored with them building forts without permission. He marches at the organization's agreement in Kolkata and captures it. He locks British prisoners in a small dungeon, which becomes called the Black Hole of Kolkata. The company moves lower back. They send a navy from Madras, led by means of a man named Robert Clive. Robert Clive is one of the maximum debatable figures in records. He isn't always an expert soldier. He is a clerk. He started his career counting beans in a warehouse. But he is a natural psychopath. He is violent, unstable, and ruthlessly bold. He is an appropriate CEO for a militarized enterprise. Clive marches to Plassey to stand the Nab's navy. On paper, it's for a suicide challenge. The Nab has 50,000 squaddies. Clive has 3,000. The Nab has heavy French artillery. Clive has a few cannons. If this had been a regular war, the British could be worn out. But Plassey is not a warfare. It is an enterprise transaction. Robert Clive is aware of that he can't win by means of combating. So he opens the corporation's checkbook. He reveals the Navy's pinnacle standard, a man named Mir Jafar. He offers Mir Jafar a deal. If Mir Jafar continues his troops out of the fight, Clive will make him the brand new Nab of Bengal. Mir Jafar accepts. The deal is signed. The contracts are exchanged. When the conflict begins, the Nab orders his cavalry to price. But Mir Jafar sits on his horse and does nothing. His considerable army stands still and watches. The Nab realizes he has been betrayed. He flees the battlefield. Robert Clive walks into the enemy camp without barely firing a shot. He has conquered a province the size of France with a bribe. The aftermath of Plassey famous the genuine nature of the organization. They do now not annex Bengal for England. They set up Mir Jafar as their puppet. And then they gift him with the bill. They demand hundreds of thousands of pounds in repayment. They empty the treasury of Bengal. They load boats with gold and silver and jewels and ship them down the river to Kolkata. Robert Clive himself takes a personal fortune that makes him the richest guy in Europe. He later tells Parliament that he turned into astonished at his personal moderation. But the looting of the treasury is just the start. The employer realizes that they have stumbled upon a new enterprise model. Why purchase cotton and silk with silver dispatched from London when you can just use the tax money of the Indian humans to buy their very own goods? In 1765, the Mughal emperor, who is now powerless, grants the business enterprise the Dwani. This is the legal proper to accumulate revenues in Bengal, Bahar, and Orissa. Overnight, a non-public company turns into the tax collector for 20 million people. The fox is now in fee of the chook house. The organization will increase taxes relentlessly. They do no longer care if the harvest fails. They do not care if the peasants starve. They have shareholders in London who expect a dividend. The ruthless efficiency of company accounting is carried out to tax farming. The end result is the wonderful Bengal famine of 1770. It is a catastrophe of biblical proportions. The rains fail and the vegetation wither. In the past, the nearby rulers could have reduced taxes or opened the grain silos to feed the people. But the organization does no longer decrease taxes. In fact, in a few regions, they multiplied them to make up for the misplaced revenue. They force farmers to grow coins, vegetation like indigo and opium as opposed to food, because the one's plants are more worthwhile for export. The humans of Bengal start to die. They die inside the fields. They die inside the streets of Kolkata. The rivers are clogged with corpses due to the fact there's no one left to bury them. 1/3 of the population of Bengal perishes. 10 million human beings starve to demise. It is one of the greatest crimes in human history. And even as the people are death, the corporation's ships are nonetheless, leaving the port full of silk and muslin bound for the markets of London. The company's percentage charge holds consistent. The dividends are paid on time. In London, the news of the famine reasons a scandal. People are horrified by the stories of greed and cruelty popping out of India. They call the organization officials nabobs, a corruption of the Mughal identify Nab. These guys return to England with vulgar amounts of wealth. They buy U.S. estates and seats in Parliament. They corrupt the British political gadget with their stolen gold. The British authorities realizes that the business enterprise has turned out to be a monster. It is too large to be unbiased. It is a nation inside a state. but they're also trapped. The British economy is now dependent on the tea and textiles coming from India. The authorities cannot wreck the enterprise without destroying itself. So they start a gradual process of law. They bypass acts to govern the administrators. They employ a governor well known to supervise the employer's affairs. The first governor preferred is Warren Hastings. He is an outstanding administrator who attempts to clean up the corruption. But the good judgment of the agency is inescapable. To pay for the administration and the dividends they need to enlarge, they need greater land, greater taxpayers, and extra markets. War turns into a necessity of commercial enterprise. The business enterprise's army grows. It is a completely unique force. The officials are British, but the soldiers are Indian. They are known as search engine marketing. They are educated in European drill and field. They are paid frequently. That's rare in India at the time. The agency uses the wealth of Bengal to lease the greatest navy in Asia. They use Indian money and Indian blood to conquer India. They turn their gaze to the south, to the dominion of Mysore, dominated by means of the tiger Tipu Sultan. They flip to the west, to the Maratha Empire. One with the aid of one. The impartial powers of India fall before the corporate system. The strategy is usually the same. Subsidiary alliances. The enterprise gives to guard a nearby ruler with their troops. In change, the ruler has to pay for the troops. If he falls behind on the bills, the company seizes his territory. It is a safety racket on a geopolitical scale. By the early 19th century, the company is the grasp of the subcontinent. They have mapped the land. They have constructed telegraphs. They have established a paperwork that is the envy of the world. But they've additionally destroyed the soul of India. They have dismantled the textile industry of Bengal to protect the factories of Manchester. They have become a self-enough civilization into a raw fabric supplier for the British commercial revolution. This became not accidental. It became policy. The company directors in Leadenhall Street and London mentioned those topics in board conferences. They checked out spreadsheets. They calculated the margin on opium. They calculated the yield on land tax. They dealt with the lives of hundreds of thousands of human beings as entries in a ledger. They showed that an agency can be far greater green at exploitation than a king ever will be due to the fact a corporation has no moral sense. It has no soul. It has most effective a fiduciary duty to its shareholders. As we quit the primary a part of this story, we see the corporation at the height of its power. It controls greater land than the Roman Empire. It generates greater revenue than the British government. But below the surface, the strain is building. The people of India are seething with rage. The sepoys, the very backbone of the business enterprise's power, are growing restless. The greed of the corporation has driven the system to the breaking point. The startup has ended up a monopoly, and like all monopolies, it has turned out to be boastful and blind. In the second component, we will see how the arena's maximum effective business enterprise collapsed in a typhoon of blood and hearth, and how its legacy continues to shape the world we live in these days. The YR is 1809. The East India Company stands as the Colossus of Asia. Its flag flies from the Khyber Pass within the north to the tropical jungles of Burma within the east. It has defeated the French, the Dutch, and every Indian prince who dared to stand against it. In London, the headquarters of the company on Leadenhall Street is the authentic center of worldwide energy. In the boardrooms, men in frock coats determine the fate of countries between sips of sherry. They decide who will starve and who will eat. They decide which borders may be drawn and which ancient laws will be overturned. To the outdoor observer, the corporation seems invincible. It seems everlasting, but within the gadget, the gears are grinding. The organization has grown too speedy. It has swallowed greater territory than it could digest. The cost of retaining a status military of 300,000 guys is astronomical. Despite the looting of India, the corporation is continuously teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. It is the traditional paradox of the too huge to fail organization. It generates huge revenue, but its operating costs are even better. To live solvent, it has to maintain increasing. It has to keep finding new assets of revenue. This want for coins leads the company into one of the darkest chapters of corporate history, the opium exchange. The organization has a hassle with China. The British public is hooked on Chinese tea. Millions of pounds of tea are imported each year. However, the Chinese emperor has no interest in British items. He demands fee in silver. The company is bleeding silver. They want a product that the Chinese need. They locate it within the poppy fields of India. The organization creates a monopoly on the manufacturing of opium in Bengal. They pressure farmers to grow poppies. They system the drug in large factories. Then they smuggle it into China. It is a state-subsidized drug cartel. When the Chinese authorities tries to stop the alternate, The company makes use of its have an effect on to drag the British government into a battle. The Opium Wars are fought to ensure the proper of the employer to sell unlawful drugs to a foreign populace. It is the remaining expression of the agency's philosophy. Profit at any cost. Back in India, the atmosphere is changing. The early technology of organization guys who found out the neighborhood languages and married Indian girls is long gone. They were replaced by means of a brand new breed of bureaucrat. These guys are racist, smug, and remote. They despise the human beings they rule. They introduce reforms that threaten the social fabric of Indian society. They introduce missionaries who attempt to convert the population to Christianity. They introduce new laws that allow them to seize the land of any prince who dies without an organic inheritor. This is called the doctrine of lapse. It is a criminal trick to steal kingdoms. The resentment is felt most keenly by way of the CO. These are the Indian soldiers who make up 90% of the organization's navy. They are proud guys, often from excessive castes. They have fought and died for the company for 100 years. But now they sense threatened. They see the business enterprise attacking their religion and their traditions. They see their pay declining in actual terms. They see that regardless of how brave they are able to never upward push above the rank of a petty officer. They are mercenaries fighting for a master who despises them. The spark that lighting fixtures the fuse is a rumor. It is the 12 months 1857. The organization introduces a brand new rifle, the Enfield Sample 53. To load the rifle, the soldier has to chunk off the give up of a paper cartridge. The rumor spreads through the barracks like wildfire. The cartridges are greased with the fat of cows and pigs. To the Hindu soldiers, the cow is sacred. To the Muslim soldiers, the pig is unclean. They consider that the enterprise is making an attempt to spoil their solid and their religion so that they can be converted to Christianity. The employer officials brush aside the fears. They giggle at the squatties. They organize them to use the cartridges or face court docket martial. It is a fatal blunders of control. They have forgotten that you cannot manipulate a military like you manipulate a warehouse. On a warm Sunday in May within the city of Meerut, the search engine optimization mutiny, they kill their British officials. They ruin open the jails. They march to Delhi, the old capital of the Mughal Empire. The Great Rebellion of 1857 has started. The British name it the mutiny. The Indians call it the first conflict of independence. Whatever you call it, it's miles the bloodiest battle in the history of the British Empire. The search engine marketing seized Delhi. They proclaim the antique Mghil emperor as the leader of the revolt. The rebellion spreads across the Ganges plain. Entire regiments flip their guns on their masters. The company's authority collapses in days. For a moment it looks as if the organization is completed. The British are besieged in Lucknow and Kanpur. Women and children are trapped. Terrible atrocities are devoted through both facets. The rebels bloodbath British civilians. The British retaliate with a savagery that shocks the world. They blow rebels from the mouths of cannons. They burn entire villages. They dangle thousands of human beings from the timber along the Grand Trunk Road. It is a race conflict fought with the bitterness of a betrayed lover. But the organization has one advantage. It has the telegraph and the steamship. It can coordinate its forces. It can bring in reinforcements from Burma and Persia and China. The rebels are brave, but they may be divided. They haven't any vital command. The Sikhs and the Gurkhas continue to be loyal to the British. Slowly, methodically, the organization's armies retake the towns. They hurricane Delhi. They sack the town. They execute the sons of the emperor. The riot is beaten, but the victory is a Pyrrhic. 1. The violence of 1827 shocks the British public. They recognize that a private organization can't be relied on with the strength of life and demise over millions of human beings. The fiction that the company is just a buying and selling firm is over. The British government comes to a decision that it need to take duty. In 1858, Parliament passes the Government of India Act. The East India Company is nationalized. Its territories, its army, its civil service, and its money owed are transferred to the Crown. Queen Victoria turns into the Empress of India. The company is dissolved. The sun sets on the company that owned a country. On the 1st of June 1874, the East India Company ceases to exist as a prison entity. Its inventory is paid off. Its ledgers are closed. The greatest predator in company history dies with a whimper, no longer a bang. But is it clearly dead? The bodily corporation is long past. However, its spirit lives on. The East India Company invented the cutting-edge world. It became the pioneer of the shareholder version. It proved that a small group of men in a boardroom may want to manage massive assets on the alternative facet of the planet. It created the model of worldwide deliver chains. It confirmed how political have an impact on will be bought, and the way laws might be shaped to suit the needs of capital. When we take a look at the world nowadays, we see the ghosts of the East India Company everywhere. We see multinational corporations which can be richer than many nations. We see groups that lease personal safety forces that look loads like personal armies. We see organizations that sue governments in secret tribunals to overturn environmental laws. We see the have an effect on of lobbyists within the corridors of power. The East India Company changed into the prototype. It became the alpha take a look at for international capitalism. It confirmed us the super energy of the joint stock organization to generate wealth. It built towns like Kolkata, Bombay, and Madras. It linked the markets of Asia with the markets of Europe. It brought reasonably priced clothes and tea to the hundreds. But it additionally showed us the dark aspect. It confirmed us what happens when the pursuit of profit is divorced from morality. It confirmed us that an employer is a gadget. It cannot feel pity. It cannot experience regret. If it's far worthwhile to starve a populace, the gadget will starve them. If it is worthwhile to promote pills, the system will sell them. If it's miles profitable to wage struggle, the device will salary conflict. The tale of the British conquest of India is not a tale of countrywide glory. It is a cautionary story about corporate power. It is a reminder that the line among a commercial enterprise and a government is regularly thinner than we suppose. The men who sat around that desk in London in Tehran did not get down to be monsters. They set out to make a go-back on funding, and in doing so, they created a monster that devoured a civilization. As we walk through the present-day monetary district of London today, we're on foot on the foundations laid by means of the East India Company, the worldwide monetary machine, the stock markets, the insurance businesses, the change networks. They all hint their lineage again to the one's early adventurers. We stay inside the world they built. An international in which capital has no borders, and in which the business enterprise is the dominant institution of our time. So the subsequent time you hear a company communicate approximately its values or its project, take into account the East India Company. Remember that its motto was Apiccio Res et Annetus Angliae, under the auspices of the King and the Senate of England. It claimed to serve the country, however, in reality, it served best itself. It changed into the company that owned a country, and ultimately it taught the sector a lesson that we're still looking to examine, that the hand of the marketplace isn't always continually invisible. Sometimes it holds a sword. I'm John, and that is the Cinematic History Tales channel. Subscribe now to stay ahead of the curve due to the fact when the records books are written, you will need to be a number of the few who saw it coming. If you want to peer the next empire, get to the bottom of earlier than your eyes, remember to subscribe. Only people who pay interest analyze what records hides.